Resources, if they are discovered and developed, are your resources. And no one should stampede you, whether as a community or your leaders on your behalf, to deal other than on that basis. The developments, if they are to be worthwhile at all, must bring to you real advantages and should not be allowed to go ahead until the inevitable disadvantages are minimized. You, on your part, must face the fact that a price is to be paid for everything. And if you are to benefit, then you will also have to experience disbenefits. You will have to pay the price of seeing changes, of seeing hardship, of seeing alterations to your very culture, which you would rather not see, in order that you can take a step forward in your evolution as a community.
I think what's happened in Cheltenham is to a large extent inevitable, and there's not a great deal that anybody could or can do to change the course of events very much. Probably the main thing to do is to ensure that once it's all over, that there's still something for the people who were there before to do once it's past. I think the thing that's changed most is the aspirations of the people. It's certainly speeded up our pace of life, if you like. It's probably having more effect on the younger generation. I mean, people younger than I am, rather than people older than I am. Because older people are more aware that it's a finite thing. It's going to come to an end someday. They may not live to see it, but it's not a permanent feature. Whereas the youngsters, well, there's hardly a child at school now in Shetland who hasn't been brought up with oil here. Say, over the last 10 years, the talk of oil, the thought of oil, or the thought of what's going to happen in the riches or otherwise. So that it's going to have a more permanent effect on their outlook on life. And it's difficult to say how permanent these changes are going to be. I think they will be permanent. Because they're in a society now where there's lots and lots of job opportunity, lots of money. And as far as they're concerned, it's always been that way. Whereas people older have known otherwise. So it's really a change in mental attitude. I think the mental way of life is going to be permanent. But the effects of that change are going to be, I don't know.
Well, it is very difficult for the local authorities, for local people, to plan ahead because the thing is so volatile. The oil industry don't tell us what they're going to do next. And to give them credit, I sometimes think they don't know what is going to happen. We don't know when the finishing date is going to be onshore at Sullom Voe, so it's to schedule. But offshore, anything may happen. We've had strikes and troubles and all the rest of it. But the whole thing is we're at the center of a vast industrialization which is completely foreign to our personal life. And we're not going to escape from it. People have become insidiously involved in the oil industry. And far more people are oil-related than they would ever admit.
A lot more so than people even think they are.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was saying the other day that even in our little newspaper and printing business, just to calculate how much of that is now oil-related is rather frightening. You get a couple of pages of advertisements in my newspaper, situations vacant, 2 pages of that alone, which of course is going to disappear in time. But we don't take that into our budgetary calculations when I say, like, we could afford another reporter now, because in another couple of years we won't be able to. And all sorts of small firms don't quite recognize how oil-related they are.
I'm also a little concerned over the takeover aspect. I think this is something we've got to be careful of.
This is true. There are certain fields in which you cannot hope for local people without the expertise to invest. But in order to get a toehold on the scene, you'll find quite possibly that your small businessman will be tempted to sell out to some consortium who are simply using it as a label to say, well, we now belong to Newfoundland and not Labrador or what have you. It means that the commitment to the community is no longer there.
That seems to me to be very dangerous indeed, and I could see us having some real problems if that happens. Has it happened in Shetland to some
It's
extent?
happened in quite a few instances. Surprisingly small firms have been bought out. I just feel that the day will come when, having been used as a tool to get something out of the oil development, these people will say thank you very much and go away. We haven't developed a lot of the spin-off industries ourselves that I would have hoped for. And I stress again the need for research and development in the first instance. The research and development department at the moment should be the most important one of the council. And secondly, from that, for a policy of immediately commencing processes that will provide employment for the many young people who won't find permanent employment when the Sullom Voe terminal is established, and who now are in construction work, which is bound to decline. In fact, we are running out of time. I think it's almost too late to catch up on some of the things. I could imagine the possibility of a certain number of young people being more or less forced to get out of Shetland because they've created for themselves a standard of life they may not be able to maintain.
Well, oil was discovered in the northern part of the North Sea around about 1968 as the first of the commercial finds. And we began to see things happening onshore, definite impact onshore, in 1970. The oil industry chose Aberdeen as its centre because of its geographical location, its proximity to the licence areas of that particular time, the fact that it was a city that could offer not only the commercial background, but the land for industry, housing and so on. It had a well-established commercial harbour, and maybe most importantly, it had an airport. So it started around about then, and it slowly built up. And when you consider that in the 9-10 years that the industry has been developing, there's something like 550 new companies have come into the area, and we've got somewhere in the region of 25,000 new jobs directly attributable to the oil industry. In the backup, or possibly another 7,000 to 10,000. So it's made a difference to our community, and it's made a difference to the area in general, because as far as development is concerned, or the participation by local industry, this isn't confined to the city of Aberdeen.
How did the cost of housing, how is that affected by the oil business?
Well, the housing in Aberdeen itself, because of the granite structure, the traditional granite structure of the houses, was always highly priced. Now, houses went up in price dramatically, but there was a whole series of contributory factors. One, of course, was the sudden advent of a lot of people. That was number one. There was a hang-up in the distribution of water supplies for a while. There was inflation was beginning to creep into the country as a whole. And all these things sort of came together round about the same time. And our house prices were shooting up virtually overnight. And to give you an example, if you were to take, say, a 3-bedroom house, in 1970 that house would be worth approximately round about 7,000-8,000, depending on location. It might be slightly higher. And I think you could consider that today somewhere in the region of 35,000.
We were in Edinburgh before we came to Aberdeen, and we had about 3 or 4 months looking for houses. We were fortunate in obtaining a house, the one that we offered for, having looked at several others. But we've got several friends who had a little while longer to wait for a house, and the house prices are very high. And this is one of the things that the oil industry has done to Aberdeen. There are new buildings blossoming all around the city for accommodation, but obviously they can't be there quickly enough. And this is causing a shortage of accommodation for people moving in. And therefore the house prices are rising accordingly. And we have an instance of a house quite near us. The person had put in an asking price for it, and it went for about £1,700 more than the person asked for, just because of the situation. There were several people going after it and so on.
The trouble for the private individual buying houses, he's up against oil companies buying houses as well, or renting. It's one and the same.
People who have property already and are renting are obviously doing quite well.
Some extraordinary rents going around the place at the moment. Very high rentals for relatively small properties. I mean, you were talking of £300 and £400 a month for a house that you would be able to purchase for sort of £35,000, and that's not a bad return. I'd like to be in the business anyway.
I think the young people in Aberdeen are finding it very hard. We're setting off on married life and looking for a house to live. And it's difficult for them to find a mortgage to purchase a house, with the house prices being the way they are, with the cost of living and the furniture and so on that they have to buy as well. It's quite a sizable thing. And I think this is one of the disadvantages of the oil industry coming to Aberdeen. The older people who have their houses and so on aren't so badly affected, I don't think. And some of them are able to sort of let parts of their house to the incomers. But basically speaking, I think the housing is the main problem.
Similar to that, you had industrial land on the edge of town. And this is land that is zoned for industry by the planning authority and serviced for industry. And in 1970, that land would have been worth round about £4,000 per acre. By 1973, 74, it had gone up to about 40,000. Then it fell back to about 28, and it slowly began to come up, and it's approximately £40,000 per acre now.
What about the local businesses that aren't oil related? Are they able to compete in terms of salaries? And then I suppose added onto that, are the people who are working in those more traditional areas able to find housing? And
Right, no, they are having problems, there's no doubt about that. The traditional company is having difficulty staffing because of the high salaries. I know an associate company of ours has lost several people just because they cannot compete with the salaries being offered by the oil companies. And yes, on the other side of it, I think a lot of people are going for these high salaries, but they're not quite appreciating what they're going to have to do for those high salaries. And I think some people are becoming a little bit disenchanted with the hours they're putting in, or the call-outs at all sorts of hours. And so it's not all one-sided.
Wonder, could you expand on that a little bit then? People have to be prepared to change their whole way, even not just on the senior levels, but also
I think,
ordinary workers.
Yeah, this goes right down. It doesn't stop at management, it doesn't stop at secretaries, it's office boys or anybody. The instance I was citing, in fact, was a junior clerk in a company who was earning about £3,000 at 25, and he was going out to an oil company and getting virtually double that. But he was going to be working up till midnight and starting again at 6 in the morning, as the company demanded. He seems to be quite happy after his first month, but we'll see how long it lasts. I think it's difficult to the whole atmosphere is different, and it's something that people are getting used to.
The maid's working hours. Our will start at 7 o'clock in the morning. They're half hour with their dinner. Stop at 5. They're back at 6, and they work at 8.
I guess it's one of the things in the oil industry, you've got to be prepared to work when they ask you to work. It's not a case 9 to 5 or 8 to 4. It's, if they ask you to, they tell you a time they want the thing made for, and it's a case you've got to be in that date, and regardless of hours, and we're lucky in this respect, the men usually respond.
So you have very short lead times.
Oh, very short.
Oh, they'll work around the clock like if you need them.
We're really short of time too. This is always a problem.
I think one of the things that struck me most was one incident when I was on call one Saturday morning, and I was phoned up about 8 o'clock in the morning and said some oil company was wanting some of our materials out to the heliport. And having asked him when the chopper was, he said he didn't know, but how quickly could I get the stuff there? And I said, about 40 minutes. And he said, oh, heavens, that long? And this sort of thing in Edinburgh or Glasgow or London, it just doesn't happen. You sort of say you want something and maybe 5-6 weeks delivery, but no, this is 40 minutes is too long. So this was my first sort of initiation into the business, and it was quite startling.
The people that work in oil games are a special type of person. You know,
They're all geared up, I think.
the workmen, they expect to be called, and they're continuously under pressure to produce the goods in time. And I think this is one of the main things in the oil game. Like, it's night and day, 24 hours a day.
I think from the person's point of view, or from someone living there, you've got to throw yourself into it. I think that would be my sort of advice on it. It's if you're going to get the most out of it, you've got to put something into it. And I feel, moving myself from a traditional based industry coming into the oil scene, that you really get a lot of pleasure and enjoyment out of working in it if you're prepared to put the effort into it yourself. There are those who, in the traditional side, who may sort of tend to sit back and sort of say, well, these oil people, we don't really want to know anything about them, but you can't afford to do that. You've got to become a part of it. If you don't become a part of it, or try to become involved in it, you'll get left behind, and you won't enjoy it, and you won't get anything out of it. And there is something to be got out of it, there's no doubt about that.
What I would like to emphasize to you this morning is that the option before you as a community is this. You must either control the developments or be controlled by them. There is no middle course. There is no sort of compromise. The developments will either be controlled by you, or the developments will sweep your community ahead, your community's future being determined by them. You see, there is no way whatsoever by which you as a community will become expert in oil developments over the next 6 months or even over the next 24 months. And the people who are likely to be able to give you advice are by and large people who are dependent on the oil industry for their livelihood. And so the chances of you obtaining the type of advice to enable you to do battle with the industry and the technical battlefields which they themselves would choose are small indeed. And so you must ensure that the battle which will take place, which must take place, if your interests are to be safeguarded, should be centered on what is good for your community. Now, the very comforting factor here is that you, rather than the oil companies, are experts on what is good or bad for your community. And the oil companies find themselves doing battle on a battleground with which they are unfamiliar, and in which there are so many pitfalls that they are almost frightened to move. It is absolutely essential that the leadership in the community actually does lead. Of course, it must keep in contact with the community in order that it might discover how people's minds are working. But in circumstances such as you face, consensus is no solution. What you require is a leadership which has the courage to go out not only to do battle with the industry, but has the courage to lead you, putting themselves 2, 3, and sometimes half a dozen steps in advance of you, and running the risk of losing contact with you, while constantly taking time and effort to restore such contact. You yourselves must have self-respect, because unless as a community and as individuals, you are aware that you have rights as human beings, and you have abilities such as are in existence in other communities, then not only will you not receive rewards, you will not deserve rewards. And you must adopt a radical approach, not worrying over what has been done or has not been done elsewhere in the world, not worrying about who might laugh at the proposals which you bring to the table. You must look at what you require, and having set your sights on that, must find solutions to deal with your problems. And you must have ideals on which you will not compromise at any price. But let me remind you of the fact that all of the greatest inventions in the world and all of the greatest solutions are the simple ones. Are the ones which, when you see them suggested by others, you ask yourself, why didn't I see that for myself? Shetland has been tremendously successful in their dealings with the oil industry and has had abundance of praise from all corners of the world. And yet nothing which was done in Shetland was particularly clever, and nothing which was done in Shetland was particularly complicated. We prepared, we had ideals, and we had dedication, and these alone are what you require to make a success of oil developments in your province.